What does it take to be a sustainability communicator in the era of AI, political shifts, regulatory change, and complex stakeholder expectations? Today, we're going to find out from one of the greats. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Sustainability Communicator, the podcast exploring the intersection of corporate sustainability and storytelling. I'm your host, Mike Hauer, a sustainability communication nerd with more than 15 years of experience on both sides of the podium, as a journalist for media outlets like GreenBiz and a communication strategist for major global companies. During each episode, we explore interesting sustainability communication challenges, risks, and opportunities facing folks in the business community and beyond. If you're ready to talk your walk, then you've come to the right place. Time to get to it. The profession of sustainability communicator is relatively new and seems to be evolving with each passing day. Success requires understanding the goals and objectives of both sustainability and marketing teams and how to translate between the two. Today, we're going to look back on how the field has evolved over the past few decades by examining the experience of someone with unmatched depth and breadth of experience in sustainability communication, Jessica Appelgren. Jessica is a friend and mentor I deeply admire for her passion for positive impact, unique creativity, and deep knowledge at the intersection of sustainability, climate tech, and storytelling. From Impossible Foods to Google and beyond, she has held a variety of communication roles in both corporate sustainability and climate tech. So today, she's an advisor and consultant for sustainability and climate-focused companies, and I'm really excited to have her come on to share her story. Thanks for being here today, Jessica.
Thank you, Mike. I just am excited to spend a good chunk of time with you because I haven't gotten that chance in a few years. So,
Yeah, no, it's
yeah.
good to catch up. Great. So I think just to kick it off, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your career journey as a sustainability communicator. Can you tell us a little bit about what got you into this space and what have been the highlights and any key lessons you learned along the way that you might share with us?
You bet. How far back can I go and how much time do I have?
Let's go back to when you were born. No, just kidding. Maybe when you first kind of knew when you wanted to do this as a career focus, maybe, and then go from there.
Yeah, I do think it's important to look at the influences on our life when we're young to really understand why we made the choices that we've made. For me, it began with parents who decided that the stewardship of land and human rights were the highest expression of work. Both of my parents devoted themselves to those things in different ways and sometimes at the same time and different times. My dad, his journey was through becoming a local politician, the mayor and the county supervisor of our town that was rapidly developing part of California known as the Inland Empire. And when I moved there as a kid, it was all orange groves and vineyards and quickly became, I think, Sunset Magazine dubbed it as the worst case of sprawl in the country. My dad's role in all of this was really to fight a lot of the development that was coming in and make sure that it was thoughtful and smart, be a steward of the land. Mom was a lawyer. She started an all women's law firm. They took on some environmental justice issues, but also did estate planning for older folks who were being taken advantage of. Both of my parents really always stood up for what was right through their work. I think that was embedded in my consciousness. And out of college, I thought journalism was the path, which I know you and I share as a passion. I got some great roles early on at magazines in the Bay Area. I became an editor of a magazine called 7x7. And I loved the impartial way that journalism functions. And yet I found it limiting. I wanted to advocate for the things that I believed in. I wanted to fight for the causes that I believed in. Unless you're doing it at a certain level, that really wasn't as much of a career option for me at the time. So I found my way into marketing and PR, though at the time, I could have never imagined myself a PR person. What I came to realize is that marketing and public relations and communications, they're just skillful advocacy for what you believe in, right? So I found a urban planning, environmental planning, landscape architecture firm called EDOB that I led marketing for. What they were doing at the end of the day was trying to create the most sustainable project environment for any of their clients, whether it was a Olympic master plan or a vernal pool advocating for the planet and messaging around sustainability just got into my blood. It was infectious. I wanted to do more of that, which led me to working at a brand new agency in the clean tech sustainability space where we provided marketing and communications for all sorts of startups from solar to EVs to batteries to Bill McDonough. And it just gave me an awesome education and communicating what sustainability is and means and trying to figure out how to get people to care.
You've done a lot of things over the last few years. How have you seen it change? Even in the 15 years I've been in this space, it's changed a ton. You've been doing this longer than me. How has it changed since you first got into this to where it is today?
I think the timeline of sustainability communication is fascinating, right? You look back and, you know, Al Gore and the idea that we need to sort of shock people into understanding how urgent this is. And then we need to get people to care and emotionally understand the dire situation that we're in. A bit of fear tactics were used in those early days to inspire change. That quickly got replaced with the notion that actually doesn't work. Like all of that gloom and shame and blame, it's creates so much dissonance that you are not actually inspired to act. When I gravitated towards this thinking was when I joined Saatchi and Saatchi S, which was the sustainability offshoot of the ad firm. Our leading principle was that sustainability should be irresistible. This isn't about making people feel bad. It's the opposite. It's about giving someone a better experience and maybe allowing them to understand that sustainability is the underpinning of that better experience. But I think that was one of the biggest fundamental changes that I've seen. I think we're still in a zone where people may value the climate and they may value sustainability, but everyone is still budget conscious and they still are not going to go out of their way to make the right choice. And you have to figure out how to work with people where they are. I think we're still in that chapter of figuring out the right mix of messages that will really unlock the behaviors that we want. But it really was like night and day. I mean, I don't know if you feel the same.
Well,
Looking,
I think we met when you were at Saatchi and Saatchi, yes. And I was just starting out my sustainability career. I was with Sustainable Brands at the time. That was the Kool-Aid I initially drank, the whole idea of sustainability being irresistible. Like my first sustainability conference was SB12, and I think that was a big theme that year. And that's, I think, what initially like brought me into this space was that idea that it's not doom and gloom, that business can be a force for good. And it does make me think a lot, even as I talk to people who want to be sustainability communicators today, like in the last few years, there's been more emphasis on compliance and making money for investors, which is a little bit of different messaging, which has definitely got a lot more people interested in sustainability than before. That financial communication isn't always as interesting as making it irresistible. It is interesting how it's evolved from more passion driven to more practical. And then, maybe we're going to move towards something that's a little mix of the two. Even right now, I mean, we've seen a huge change in the past year with companies pulling back, being afraid of getting called out on both sides for either greenwashing or being woke. I think there's just a lot of things in flux.
a lot of things in flux. Yeah. I mean, even the idea of sustainability as risk mitigation became suspect because any amount of ESG signaling became risky, right? It's pretty wild what the last couple of years have brought to the table in terms of how to do this right, you know?
The next question I wanted to focus on is what are the skills that successful sustainability communicators need to cultivate? I have people asking me all the time who want to break into this space, or either communication generalists who want to be more focused on sustainability or sustainability practitioners who want to get better at comms. What would you say are the top three most important skills that a sustainability communicator should have today and moving forward?
Yeah, I think number one, be a good researcher, collect your data in a very credible way, in a very citable way, and have it at the ready to support anything you're trying to communicate. Build messaging on top of that that is authentic, compelling, true, brief, to the point, and emphasize that over and over again until it is understood. I think empathy is probably the most fundamental underlying necessity that you must have. I think about the campaigns and endeavors that have gone well and what hasn't gone well in my career, and usually I can tie it back to how much empathy we, the brand, or we, the agency, were showing to the consumer or the audience, and not just one audience, but multiple audiences, because everyone is taking in what you're putting out. I think that that's a very good way to evaluate whether what you're doing is right.
I think that's all great advice, and it's particularly that first piece about being a good researcher. I think people often assume that if you're a sustainability communications person, you just have this mystical knowledge. And I try to tell people, no, we're just good at learning because this is changing all the time, and you just have to read a lot. Actually, I learned the most about talking to people who are out there doing stuff, going to conferences or doing catch ups on LinkedIn or whatever. But I think, yeah, take like giving yourself permission to not be perfect and being able to tell clients, I might not know this now, but I can figure it out for you and put it through this lens of sustainability communication. I think that's huge.
That's right. And how much fun it's like being in school forever. It's
Yeah.
your job to keep
Yeah.
staying curious and staying aware of all the angles that are out there on this topic and weave together something that is strong. It's probably my favorite part of the job.
Yeah, I've had lots of guests on this pod so far, and that seems to be a common trend. Some of these people are very well established, and they're like, "I don't know it all. I just know how to learn, ask questions, and keep up." It allows us to stay relevant because things are changing so fast. I even tell people all the time when I'm giving career advice, I don't expect to be doing the exact same thing in 5 years that I'm doing right now. Like, it's going to be changing. Some people might think that's scary, but I find it exciting.
100% agree. I need evolution.
Well, I'd love to dive into a specific role that you've had because I think it was an interesting experience that highlights a common challenge at your time at Impossible, leading communication there. When you started at Impossible, I think it was right around when alternative meat was just getting bigger as a thing. Now everybody kind of knows what it is. But back then, it was less common or less common knowledge. Yeah, what were some of the challenges you faced communicating just Impossible's offering and this new kinda at the time, maybe it was considered a weird technology. What did you learn from that experience that translates to how sustainability communicators can tackle other challenges?
Yeah, definitely have a whole book in me on this topic. When I was acting, I started talking to the founder, Pat Brown, in 2014. My younger sister was at Stanford and heard he was starting this sustainable meat and dairy company. My grandfather had run a dairy in California that he built from nothing. I knew a lot about the issues with that system from a sustainability climate perspective. I knew this was where I needed to be. By the time I joined Impossible and we launched the company, Beyond Meat was out there. People had maybe heard that there was a way to make meat differently, but it was our job as the communications team to make people understand the problem, which was really underrepresented in the media at that time for many, right? Animal agriculture is a giant system, a giant global system that has so much funding coming into it from different public private sources. To illuminate the problems with the system, you are going to create many enemies right off the bat. The challenge was, how do we illuminate the problems with this system while also selling a product that could replace what people love so much? Everyone remembers their favorite hamburger growing up. There's so much emotion wrapped into food, and yet there were real facts that we needed to convey around the environmental impacts of animal agriculture from a climate, water, land perspective. So how do you build a brand that's exciting, sexy, and irresistible while at the same time make the world understand the dire problems related to eating the amount of beef and red meat that we eat as a species? I think it was almost too easy at the beginning to get people excited. I think we had
Hmm.
an strategy, partnering with influencers, chefs,
Mm.
to get people excited about this, using cultural levers, to bring people in to a new movement that had meaning, and excitement. The comms were just fluid, right? We
Mhm.
launched, people were excited. When I think back, I think that we weren't thinking about the 5 years coming. We were successful enough to have enough of a target on us, to think through the messaging at that point and how it could or should have been different to not create such a target for ourselves. I think we went into the communications really guns blazing, wanting to make the world truly understand the seriousness of this problem. One of my first conversations with Pat was that we needed a sustainability report. And he said, Jessica, he listened to my whole presentation. And he said, Jessica, CSR and sustainability reports are for shoe companies. We are Impossible Foods. We just need to sell the product and get people to love it. I totally heard him. But guess what we did? I lobbied to launch our first sustainability report in 2017. I wanted to chart our course around how we are thinking about sustainability. By the second report, Pat was very invested and wanted to have the cover read FUCK, the meat industry. We almost got that cover through, but that's an example of
Yeah.
our sustainability communications that had a price tag to it. The content of that report was very contentious. We heard a lot from all sorts of parties that felt differently than we did. What I wish we would have thought through is how we might have shown up as meat and welcome people to a new kind of meat rather than creating all the animosity that we thought was necessary to shock people into change. I think if we would have approached it slightly differently, maybe some of the things that ended up being taxing on the company might not have happened. I think a lot about that when I look back on what went well and what could have gone better.
It's also interesting to see how, like, in the time that you were there, I think the political climate changed a lot in the US. Who would have thought that today I've been hearing things about people on the right criticizing lab grown meat and trying to say it's anti American? Like, you couldn't have really anticipate that as a communicator, right? Back
Well, I
then.
mean, I will never forget the moment when Donald Trump was elected and we went from an Obama administration to a
Yeah.
Trump administration, and we realized our whole strategy needs to shift, right? That this is a different landscape. And we got wrapped right into the culture wars. I mean, from Joe Rogan to you name it, everyone had an opinion about Impossible and the Impossible Burger. It made for a lot of ink, but was that all strategically valuable or not? But how might we have harnessed those tensions better? I think a lot about that. Yeah.
I knew you guys had succeeded when my dad, who's like the biggest meat eater on the planet, got his first Impossible Whopper, and he was like, "Mike, this is pretty good. Like, good job." I had nothing to do with it, but he's like, they thought it was part of sustainability, and I was like, "Yeah, Dad, you're exactly the target market they're going for." So,
That is one of our best communications ever was a commercial we did with Burger King to launch the Impossible Whopper, where it was just people trying the Whopper, being fooled and
that's funny.
not believing that they hadn't eaten meat. Yeah.
That's hilarious. All right, so I think one of the areas where you and I have overlap of experience is we both worked both in climate tech and corporate sustainability, which are related. Maybe they're cousins. They're not quite the exact same industry. We both worked in comms roles. I'm really curious from your perspective, what are the similarities and differences communicating in climate tech versus corporate sustainability? And I guess Impossible technically could be classified as a climate tech company, so it kind of runs both worlds. But yeah, like what overlap would you see there? And do you see it as if someone's looking to go into this career path, should they pick a lane and go either I'm a climate tech communicator or I'm a corporate sustainability communicator? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it depends on what gets you excited when you wake up in the morning. For me, I love creative brand expression. That can be applied to climate tech, corporate sustainability, and consumer sustainability. But that is what really lights me up. When I was working with clean tech companies and still to this day, I am constantly looking for the cultural levers to pull to create brands that are exciting, culturally relevant, and design forward, all of the things that make me more interested in the company. So that's my personal journey. I think climate tech has a functionality. You need to be able to communicate how it works, why it works, what it saves, and what it does. I really enjoy the communications around that because it makes sense. We have this problem, we have these goals, this is the solution for it. It will work in these ways. This is what the investment is and how long it will take. I think sustainability and corporate CSR and corporate sustainability is more emotional. It's a bit more storytelling, like heavy. And I think that it requires, slightly more creativity to invite people to be interested. I remember, I don't know, when we were representing Caesars Entertainment
Hmm.
and their competitor had launched their sustainability report as a Las Vegas show. It was there was a document, but it was a
Uh,
lived experience that they put on, and I was so excited by that. I just thought this has changed the game. How can you get people really emotionally connected to the sustainability story you're trying to tell? I think it's just a slightly different pathway. Not that you can't do both, but I think
yeah.
you have to think about what excites you the most
Mhm.
and follow that path.
That's funny. Now that you mention it that way, that's actually one of the reasons why I didn't like working in climate tech. My issue with climate tech was the lack of passion in the communication there. Because at the end of the day, it was like we're just trying to sell this product, and sustainability was one of the selling points, but it wasn't the only selling point. And I think that's what's kind of pushed me back into this corporate sustainability space, even though I still work with climate tech companies occasionally. But yeah, that's interesting. More dispassionate, more practical, but you can get a lot done in climate tech as well. It's like whatever drives you the most, right?
At the end of the day, I'm always thinking about, okay, we have this finite amount of time on this planet. How apply my skill set in this time toward these goals of preserving this planet for everyone? Some of these climate tech solutions are bankable. They are not subject to the whims of who's in office, and it's going to work. I'm working with a few carbon capture companies right now, and there's a lot of folks out there that say we shouldn't be doing this. We should be only doing renewables. And yet I know that this tech works and it is necessary and it's not as emotional, but it is going to do what we need done, which is we just have too much carbon. And even if we made all the changes right now, we still have too much carbon. So
Uh,
we need these technologies. And I get emotional about it in the bigger picture. We need all of the solution. And
mhm,
I can find the passion, but I know what you
mhm.
mean.
I think I haven't been in this space that long, but long enough where I realize that passion is not enough to sustain you throughout a whole career. Just something I tell younger people all the time. Like you should have the passion, but you're gonna have periods of your career where you're like, "What am I doing? Is this actually making a difference?" And you have to fall back on the more practical. Like, is this actually having the result I want to have in the world, and not just result on that raw emotion because it's not always going to be there.
Yeah.
Cool. Speaking of solutions, artificial intelligence is what everybody's talking about these days. I know you're working a lot at that intersection right now. I'm just curious, even as a communications guy, how is AI going to influence what I'm doing to help my clients? That's actually a force multiplier for a lot of comms people. I know there's some fears like, is it going to replace us? Like, if an AI can write, is the writer necessary? I have a lot of thoughts on that, which I don't think it's going to replace us. I think it's just going to help us. Curious what you think, where you think AI is going to play in sustainability communication specifically. I know there's a lot of talk about how AI is going to help with measuring sustainability progress and things like that. But more from a communication standpoint, what are the opportunities for AI and what can communicators do to kind of stay with the times?
Yeah, I have thought a lot about this. As you know, I spent the last year at X, the moonshot factory,
Yeah.
the arm of Google that looks at how we really tackle the world's biggest problems. And a good amount of what is happening at X is AI related. Getting a real deep dive into some of these methodologies was fascinating. But when I think about, so, one example from my X time is a project called Tapestry, who is using AI to shorten the amount of time it takes for grid planners to create scenarios that will give the decision makers confidence in taking a cold plant off the grid and replacing it with renewable resource. Usually it takes humans months to create these plans and reports and to have AI kind of collapse that amount of time, give you all of that information and data like right away, and arm the decision makers in real time. I mean,
Hmm.
it's a game changer. The country of Chile is making decisions about their grid right now related to, they're going to be completely renewable by 2030 using this tech. So, there's real world applications like that. But then there's also, I was excited when I saw a friend, Paul Young, head of sustainability at GitHub. He created a tool on ChatGPT called the IPCC Climate Science Helper. It's an approachable expert in climate science specializing in IPCC source knowledge. How many times have you read these reports and tried to make sense of it so that you could glean what was really important for your client, for your company
Mhm.
to convey? And now there's a tool that you can ask exactly what you
That's
need
so cool.
to know. It cuts down the amount of time. You're still doing the research. You have to do the research,
Mhm.
but you have a helper making it much easier. So back to all of the data we have about the planet that now could be made more accessible to us. It's so exciting. I think that solutions are just going to come at a quicker clip because of it. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, I've talked to a few friends. Sometimes it's in a joking way of creating like AIs that could, for example, like a ESG reporting AI that can keep you up to date on regulatory changes. That would save a lot of time. And I know there's some consultants that worry, why would they hire me if they have an AI? But to your point, the AI is also not perfect yet, but you're going to need someone that can handle the AI, that can use the AI. Were you the one telling me about how you can clone yourself or you can have it copy your mannerisms and how you would speak? That's kind of what we're working towards almost. So I could like sell a Mike Hauer AI almost.
So that's absolutely something I had a conversation with a very influential investor about. This individual, such a storied career and so much as an investor with founders and ideas and businesses. He thought, how can I shortcut all of this and have the benefit of all of the information I've already conveyed out in the world through email and correspondence, kind of mined for the reaction I might have to this so that, it cut down on his amount of time spent. This individual personally receives and reads every email he gets, which I think is phenomenal. I think there are going to be a lot of system benefits that come
Mm,
AI for personal time management, and also he was thinking it from from a legacy perspective, like how might he parent his great grandchildren once he's gone, give them the benefit of his experience, takes it into a whole other,
no, let's not go down that path there. That is, wow, that is interesting.
how can we pass on knowledge and how
Yeah,
can we mine knowledge more efficiently?
right. That's what we're going for. And in an increasingly complex world, particularly in sustainability, I feel stressed trying to stay on top of everything all the time. Having a tool that could help me even stay focused, like, all right, here's like the 10 things you need to know this week would be
Yes.
helpful. And, before you'd have to hire a team of people to scour the internet to get that information. If an AI could do that, where are those entry level jobs going? Maybe new jobs will be created. We don't need to get into that right now, but great. So moving on, um, there's often a tension between CMOs looking to communicate sustainability and maybe those chief sustainability officers. I know you've worked in roles where you've kind of advised both, or you kind of played sort of a hybrid role. What advice would you give a CMO today, whether they're at a climate tech startup or even just at a big corporation? If they're worried about, okay, if we put out the wrong thing, we're going to get sued. Maybe on one side, we're going to get hit on the left for not going far enough. On the right, they're going to call us woke. This is what's leading a lot of companies to just doing nothing, but now they have to do something because of all the regulatory changes. What advice would you give a CMO today who maybe is not a sustainability expert, but knows they need to communicate sustainability and how to move forward?
Yeah, I think understanding your company and going back to your brand values is essential when it comes to any communication for a CMO. Like, who are we at the end of the day? How do we show up in the world? How does that sound? How do we want people to understand us? I think that your sustainability communication should just be an extension of that. So you need to be super clear on those and you need to defend those with every decision you make around sustainability. With Impossible, we endeavored to be the most transparent food company on the planet. We endeavored to be disruptive. Like there were some fundamentals that I leapt from in both the marketing role that I eventually played as VP of marketing, as well as the leader of our sustainability team. And it was the blueprint for how we were going to craft a strategy and defend that strategy. So I think it's as simple as that. And then there's a term, nemawashi in Japanese, where you're making sure that you're checking in with all the stakeholders all the time. You need to do that with sustainability. You need to get people on board, and that's the piece that AI can't replace. It's the internal politics that is required to get the right stakeholders engaged with the strategy, I think that piece is very human and super important.
Yeah, I see that with my own work where a lot of my clients, like 90% of their job is just internal stakeholder management. Even as especially as a comms person, they're, they use the term socializing pretty much everything that has to go out. And the bigger the company, the more people that need to have eyes on it. And sometimes it is political where they're not mission critical for actually looking at it. But if they don't, then people are upset. And so there's a lot of that human element. You're right. That unless I guess AI replaces everybody. I heard the other day that there might be AI CEOs pretty soon, but that's going to be a pretty scary day if that happens.
Well, I hadn't heard that. Please send me the article. I will read it. Yeah, wild. But yeah, the socialization bit. Everybody wants to feel engaged, and especially something now that's becoming more and more risky. Like you've got to get that buy-in.
Yeah, and I think you kind of already answered my last question here, which is really about how sustainability and marketing teams can learn to work better together. We talked a little about this on a recent episode. I had a guest where he was talking about how his sustainability marketing teams have developed a quote unquote closeness, which kind of allows them to both understand each other's different goals and how they overlap. And it's created a lot of opportunities. So a lot of the marketing people can see opportunities, sustainability people maybe can't once they realize what they're working on together. How have you seen that worked well? You kind of talked about this a little bit with the previous question, but how can marketing teams and sustainability teams kind of develop this closeness?
Yeah, I think making yourself a huge asset to a marketing team is something I think you and I both know Rebecca Moses, who
Oh
was
yeah.
head of sustainability at Impossible.
Oh, you guys are besties. Yeah, I mean that's like the
I mean,
epitome of yeah,
I was so lucky that I got
yeah.
a chance to have her on my team, but she was an invaluable resource for the sales team, for the marketing team, for the procurement team. She was so knowledgeable about our supply chain and how our sustainability practices improved it. She could tell you anything about what information was most important in the sales cycle with a new retailer or, food service customer to make them understand how they could use the sustainability data to their benefit. She was such a fountain of knowledge, made herself so valuable to the organization that the marketing team was just so excited to tap into that resource with authentic communications around what we were doing. So we crafted amazing programs around helping younger generations understand sustainability and could not have done any of that without a deep resource like Rebecca. So I think it's less a push and more a pull
Mm.
from the sustainability team. Like if you can show your chops and show how it is benefiting the business, the marketing team's gonna catch on and they're gonna pull.
All of that. Yeah, I've been hearing that in a lot of my conversations, both on the record and off record recently, about a lot of the sustainability challenges are just business challenges. And the most successful sustainability directors that I know, they've figured out how to treat it as a business challenge and letting go of we got to do this because it's the right thing. It is the right thing, but that's not going to convince people who are being measured for other things in your business. So, um, good advice. Great. Well, anything else you'd like to add before we let you go?
I guess I just am thrilled that we got to hang out. I think that this space is not going to be replaced by computers. There's a innately human creative element to what we do because everything's shifting so fast and the urgency to get this right has never been greater. So I think that anyone listening that wants to get into this space should put their hand up and jump in because it's more needed now than ever. And it's such a fascinating, exciting moment to be doing this. So thanks for having me. It's been super fun to just
No, thank you
chat.
so much, Jessica, for taking the time. So everybody, this is Jessica Appelgren. She is I just call her sustainability communications extraordinaire. Follow her on LinkedIn. I'll include a link to her profile in the show notes. And thanks for tuning in today.
Thank you, Mike.
And with that, we've reached the end of this episode of the Sustainability Communicator podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you like what you heard and you'd like to hear more, stay tuned for future episodes that cover a variety of topics in sustainability storytelling. To stay in the know of future episodes and other content, you can follow me Mike Howard on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Engage newsletter. You can find those links in the show notes. And if you enjoy the Sustainability Communicator podcast, it really helps us out if you can tell a friend about the pod, forward it to one of your colleagues or friends or family members, and also give us 5 stars on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. Wherever you are in your sustainability journey, good luck and keep at it. We need you out there.